So, to make this easier for me, obviously, I think everyone here knows you guys both were born with the same name here, so I'm going to make it simple for me. And Mr. Taylor, Mr. Day, I hope that's suitable for you guys. Make it easy to address you guys that way. Go ahead and get started. I'll allow Mr. Day here to introduce himself to you, jump to everyone here in the crowd, and give a little quick speech. So.
Okay, well, first of all, hello. Obviously, I'm Greg Day. I want to thank Heath and the entire GOP party for putting this on. Also want to thank each of you for coming out and taking an interest in the election, and for all of you that are live streaming it online. You know, voting for our elected officials is one of the most important things that we can do. It's one of the most important civic duties that we have. It's nothing that we can take lightly and just go in and cast a ballot for somebody that we kind of know or we just know the name of. We need to ensure that we are getting the best leadership and representation for our county. So it's imperative that we examine the track record and the history of each person that's running, and that's why I think nights like tonight are so important. So again, thank you. So what do you want to know about Greg Day, I guess? I'm a lifelong resident of Lawrence County. I'm a conservative Republican and a strong supporter of the Constitution. I'm a academic top 10 graduate from B&L, class of 1992. I graduated cum laude from Indiana State University in 1995 with a bachelor's degree in education. My beautiful wife and I have been married for almost 26 years. We have 2 kids. Our son Heath is 21 years old. He works full-time for John Deere and is about to graduate in a couple of weeks with his bachelor's degree. My daughter Claire is 18, and she works at a local retail store and is about to graduate high school next month. We're longtime members of the Mitchell Church of Christ, where I've been an elder for the past 6 years. I'm also a prior 9-year director of Spring Hill Bible Camp. So my faith and my family is very important to me, and that guides me in everything that I do. I spent the last 25 years in law enforcement. I began my career with the Lawrence County Jail in 1997 and 1998. I was quickly promoted to jail commander, where I oversaw all aspects of the facility. And I've been with the Indiana State Police for 23 years, with the last 11 of those being in an administrative and supervisory position. Almost 6 years ago, I formed the Bloomington District ACES, which you read about oftentimes in the paper on WBIW. It's a never-before-tried team of uniformed officers and drug detectives who work together attacking the drug problem at a local level. It has been so successful and set the standard that the superintendent of state police has instituted the same kind of team at every district in the state, and I'm very proud of that. During my time with ISP, I've served as a longtime field training officer. I was a member of the Tactical Intervention Platoon, and I completed an intensive 6-week training class through the University of North Florida Institute of Police Technology and Management, and was a certified crash instructionist for many years. Graduated the State Police Leadership Academy, and also went through dozens and dozens of other specialized trainings on all types of investigations, as well as leadership, supervision, and incident command. Very humbled that in my career, I've been honored with several awards, such as 7-time winner of the Trooper of the Year, 5-time winner of the Bedford Exchange Club Officer of the Year, and I won the 2017 Monroe County Exchange Club Officer of the Year, to name just a few. I've also taught many classes, both to ISP and to the IU Police Academy, and I'm extremely proud of the fact that the command of the state police recognized my leadership abilities and tasked me with developing and teaching a class at the Leadership Academy called Leadership During Times of Crisis. So I do, before we get to the questions, I do want to take a few moments here just to say that this campaign's been really enjoyable for me in a lot of aspects, but also been a little bit difficult in one area. And I think it's important to say this, that, you know, Greg and I have been friends for many, many years. We've hunted together, we've played a lot of practical jokes on each other, and I think we've been there for each other through some really, really tough times. We just happen to want the same job right now. And likewise, with Sheriff Branham, he and I have always worked well together. and I will always appreciate the time that he spent with me when I went to him and expressed my interest that I was thinking about running for sheriff. So I say that to say that I would do myself a disservice if I obviously don't point out things that I think need changed or some things that I haven't always agreed with. I have to, we each have to put out there why we think that we are the best candidate. And it's not a personal attack. I don't want anybody to think that it's a personal attack. It's just me trying to say why I am asking for your support. So with that being said, as we approach this election, I'm confident there's going to be a lot made about my lifetime at the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department. And I'm all right with that, and I think all of you should be too. I am an outsider. I'm a fresh perspective with new solutions to old problems. I'm not satisfied with just the status quo, and I feel like I can bring successful ideas and programs from many different areas that I've worked with and apply them here locally to better serve you. I don't want to have a department that just belongs to me or a small group of employees. I don't want to lead a department. I don't want to lead my department. I don't want to lead our department. I want to lead your department. I want to put public back in public service and put you first in all that we do. Thanks.
Mr. Taylor, the floor is yours.
Well, I'd like to start out by saying, Greg, I do forgive you for coming and stealing my tomatoes out of my garden that night. And I'm sorry I crashed my car into you down at Mitchell that night. So we do have some pretty good history between us. I'm Greg Taylor. That's Greg with 2 G's. I got to be a little different there. I am the Chief Deputy for the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department. I've been a dedicated member of the Sheriff's Department for 26 years. I began my career in Lawrence County in 1989 with the Probation Department, joined the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department in February of 1996. Married to my lovely wife, Alita, for 32 years. We have raised 2 beautiful daughters, Emily and Casey, have a grandson and a son-in-law, and I just love Lawrence County. I'm a lifelong resident of Lawrence County. I'm a lifelong Republican, believing in conservative values, faith, and family. I'm a graduate of Bedford Lawrence High School. I have an Associate of Science degree from Vincennes University in Conservation Law Enforcement. I have a bachelor's degree from Indiana Wesleyan University in Business Administration. My experience at the department for the first 15 years, I was assigned as a patrol officer, taking calls for service. During that time, Sheriff Sam Craig appointed me as the DARE officer, a position I proudly held for 10 years, working hard, working diligently to bring the DARE program into the North Lawrence schools to thousands of those students. For 10 years, I was a full-time training coordinator. Sheriff Craig appointed me to that position as well. And then upon Sheriff Brandon being elected, taking over in 2015, he promoted me to the position of Major, third in command to the sheriff at the department. Held that position for 6 years, and then in 2021, Sheriff Brandon promoted me to the position of Chief Deputy, which I hold today, second in command to the sheriff in the daily operations of the law enforcement and jail divisions. I believe Chief Deputy is the only position that really gives you a true taste and true insight of what the sheriff deals with on a daily basis. For in the absence of the sheriff, you do assume command of operations. Just this past week, the sheriff was on vacation. Therefore, I fell into his seat, if you will. Called out a couple of times this past week to deal with some situations that officers had got into in the middle of the night. Had to deal with a human resource issue concerning an employee. Had to step in and deal with the situation, their situation ongoing. So there was a lot of things this past week with the sheriff being gone I had to step into. So my other experience with the department, I served as a breacher and a sniper on our ERT team. I am a past recipient of the Office of the Year and a past recipient of the Department Life Saving Award. So with that, that's about what there is for Greg Taylor. We do attend the First Assembly of God Church here in Bedford on 27th Street. We've been there for probably 20 years. I served on the board for 12 years. Currently an elder of the church. I do lead the open air encounters outdoor ministry at the church. put on the Connect the Kids to the Outdoors program at Sugar Creek. I've done that for several years through the church. My hobby, I'm a turkey hunter, I'm a sporting clay shooter, I'm a gun guy. So that's a little bit about Greg Taylor.
Okay, well, I think I know the answer considering both your gentlemen's impressive resumes as to why you're running for sheriff, but you can elaborate on that if you like, Mr. Taylor, but also outline your individual goals if you are to win during your first term as sheriff.
Sure. The reason I'm running for sheriff is very simple: pride and dedication. Being a 26-year member of the Lawrence County Sheriff Department, it's taken dedication. It is the only department that I have worked for. I spent my entire law enforcement career there. I have not wore any other uniform. This is where I decided to serve, and this is where I have stayed. And during that course of time, I have developed a great deal of pride. Pride in our department, pride in our accomplishments, pride in our officers, and pride in our county. So that is why I'm running for sheriff. We have a solid platform of leadership. We have a solid platform of professionalism and service to our citizens, and I want to continue forward with that. I have several goals. I've listed just a few of those here. First and foremost, to continue to build on our excellent foundation of professionalism, cooperation, and service to our citizens. Another goal I have is I want to implement new jail policies. A couple of years ago, the sheriff and the chief deputy at that time, and myself when I was major, we worked diligently to update and put in place new policies for our law enforcement division. It's been a few years since our jail division has had those policies updated. I want to work on that and get those implemented. I want to work on our canine interdiction program. We're getting ready to start that. That will allow our dedicated canine officers, we have one assigned to each shift, that will allow them more time to go out and focus on drug interdiction patrols. We've had some issues with staffing. We're now back to full contingency, but before that, our officers are trying to take calls for service, do drug interdiction, while they're having to go on calls for trespass, domestic violence, working wrecks, so it's taking a lot of their time away. This program will allow them to be able to focus more straight on drug interdiction. Want to work on employee wellness program. You know, these jobs over the years, law enforcement and corrections, seeing some horrific things, dealing with some of the worst that society has to offer day after day, it can kind of sand the edges off. And we can see stress and other factors build up in employees. Even life in general can do that. So I want to get an employee wellness program in place, looking at several models for that. That way, if we have an employee that comes to us and says, hey, I'm dealing with some stress in my life, I'm dealing with some issues, we will have tools and people in place that we can work with them, get them through their issues, and get them back to full speed. I want to continue to work on community involvement. We will establish Coffee with a Cop seminars or programs, if you will, periodically throughout the county in different locations. And that'll be to hear citizen concerns, but not only for them just to come in and meet the sheriff and his staff, but I want them to be able to meet that third shift canine officer. I want them to be able to meet that second shift correctional officer, so they know who's working for them diligently in Lawrence County. And I want to see all of our officers CIT certified. CIT is a program that helps officers deal with and recognize people that are dealing with issues of mental illness. That is an ongoing problem we have. In fact, we have a CIT program coming up next month. We have 4 officers going to that. But I want to ensure that they're all CIT certified, so if they're going on calls for service, dealing with these types of situations and these people, they can recognize the need, recognize what's going on, and it's a proven fact that it will increase officer safety and increase safety for the person that they're dealing with.
Mr. Day, can you outline your individual goals and why you're running for the office?
Absolutely. So let me first answer why I'm running. As I said earlier, I want to put public back into public service. You know, during my 25 years in law enforcement, I often get frustrated when I see agencies, including the state police. We're not immune, our leaders, but I get very frustrated when I see agencies that don't work closely together, when I see decisions that get made that don't put the well-being of our citizens first. It's more about taking care of the agency than it is the people we're supposed to be serving. I get upset when accountability seems to just be a feel-good phrase that we use, but yet we don't really practice accountability. I get frustrated when quality hard work is not rewarded and when it's not encouraged. And I get frustrated whenever decisions are made that benefit a small group of employees as opposed to everyone from top to bottom. So I figured, as a guy who loves Lawrence County, who's dedicated my entire professional career to serving people, I figured I could just sit around and complain about it and talk about how things ought to be done, or I could step up and try to be the catalyst for positive change that could make a difference for each of you. You know, I have a vision of what we can accomplish and a plan for how those things can be achieved. So I decided to use my experience, my leadership, my track record of quality work, my unparalleled work ethic, and run for this office so that I can do things that benefit the community on a larger scale. Now, I don't have individual goals for myself. I'm not running for this position for myself in any way, shape, or form. If I am fortunate enough to be elected, I do have team goals, and I have goals for our community. There's a lot of great men and women that work at the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department. I believe that wholeheartedly. And I believe that with the right leadership, the right vision, the right plans, that we can become a premier law enforcement agency in the state. I think everyone can work together and we can produce results for you. We're going to be an agency that's known for accountability, for professionalism, for quality work, for work ethic, and cooperation. Those are the 5 foundational pillars that I've lived both my personal and professional lives upon, and we will model that in everything that we do as an agency. You know, an organization or an agency is only as strong as its weakest link. So our objective is going to be maybe take some of those employees who may be doing poorly and help them to do well. We want employees who are doing well and help them to do better. And those employees who are doing very well to do great. Our goals in this community are going to include providing excellent service, creating and maintaining the safest community possible to live in and to raise our kids in, and to always put others ahead of ourselves. I am truly excited with what the future holds. If we're willing to think outside the box and we're willing to take a chance on somebody who's just got a lot of ideas and a guy who has 25 years proven track record of getting successful results.
Okay. Well, so you brought up Sheriff's Agency. If you were elected sheriff, Mr. Day, how would you coordinate the Sheriff's Department work alongside the other law enforcement entities within the county, like Bedford Police Department, Mitchell Police Department, State Police, which obviously you work with now? Do you have any ideas to strengthen those relationships, strengthen the coordination and effectiveness of law enforcement throughout the county? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Well, as I stated earlier, one of my foundational pillars is cooperation. And one of my main priorities is interagency working relationships. You've all heard that old saying, united we stand, divided we fall. Well, that's true in law enforcement, just as it is in anything else. We're stronger when we all work together. And I get it. Every department wants to show that they don't need any help and that they can take care of any situation on their own. It's kind of a pride thing, and there's definitely something to be said for having that ability. We all should have that ability. However, it goes back to what I said in my introduction. You know, if we're supposed to be serving the public, and there are ways that we can achieve results more efficiently and more effectively, then why do we let pride stand in the way? Why not tap into those things? You know, oftentimes I'm guilty of using common sense when examining questions or specific issues. So maybe I'm the crazy one here. But if we have experts and we have talents knowledge, and information at all these various departments. Wouldn't it make sense to bring these people together to achieve justice for our victims more efficiently and in a more timely fashion? It doesn't make one agency seem weaker. In fact, it makes everyone seem more professional, more accountable, and while, again, going back to what I said, putting you first. I could stand up here and I could talk for an hour, telling you story after story through 25 years of how when agencies were stubborn and refused to work with other agencies, that it delayed justice and sometimes prevented justice from being done ever. And I can also tell you cases where when officers did work together from other agencies, the great successes that came from that. I'm just a big proponent in cooperation and working together. And I think I'm in a unique position to bridge that gap that seems to have existed between agencies for several years. In my 23 years as a law enforcement officer, I'm proud of the fact that I've always worked closely with officers and department leaders from all other agencies. Especially during my years before I became a supervisor, I guarantee you I worked closer with members of the Sheriff's Department and Bedford PD than I did other troopers. Oftentimes I was the only trooper in 5 counties, so I learned real quick the value of working with other agencies. My team, the ACEs that I talked about earlier, and I will continue to work very closely with others, both here in Lawrence County, but really all across southern Indiana. There's members of the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department that I consider longtime friends, and that we still share information and we help each other out on a regular basis. Our working relationship with Bedford PD is outstanding right now. We have worked dozens of large joint drug investigations with them, and the same goes for my relationship with officers from Mitchell and Olynyk and the other departments. It's past time to kind of fix this at an administration level, and I really look forward to having the opportunity to work alongside Chief Moore, Chief Hardman, and Marshal Harrington at a larger scale than just what my little ACES team can do right now. I truly don't care who gets the credit as long as our citizens are getting the service that they deserve. It starts with communication between department leaders. It includes training, especially if one of my priorities that hopefully we'll talk about later is improving school safety. We should train the way that we're going to respond. And if something happens at one of our schools, there's going to be officers from every single agency responding. So we need to be training that way. It includes concerted efforts between agencies to join forces on investigations. I like to use the example of the catalytic converter theft ring from last year, and how there were officers from 15 different agencies that were working thefts all over the place. And we brought 3 or 4 folks together from different agencies, and we were able to solve that, and people went to prison, and victims got justice for that. I would eventually love to be able to take the cooperation to never before seen levels in this county, and I know it can't happen overnight, but I would love to form a joint agency major crimes task force. And this isn't like a full-time team, but instead it's people with expertise in different areas, whether it be investigations, drug investigations, because as we all know, drugs are at the root of almost all crimes that are committed. Crime scene technicians, and even, I like to say if something happens in Springville, Indiana, a major incident, and we can bring all these experts in to solve it faster, we should also get a hold of, a couple of those officers who make their home in Springville, because they know those people, they know the victims, but they're also going to have inside information that maybe some of the rest of us don't. If we all have something different to offer towards an investigation so it becomes more efficient, then let's tap into it. It's like bringing all the great minds together into one place to solve a problem. And I just think that I can build on my already existing excellent working relationships and build that trust between agencies, and we can really start to make some real progress. I'm confident that the large majority of officers at the patrol level across the board are ready for this to happen. So let's quit letting pride get in the way and let's make it happen.
Chief Deputy Taylor, do you have anything to add to that? As far as, obviously, you get an inside view from the Sheriff's Department on the relationship from that standpoint. Is there any issues that you see currently? Any ways you think you can improve that relationship if you're elected sheriff? Those relationships, rather?
Well, in 26 years at the Sheriff's Department, I have seen us work with other agencies. We continue to work with other agencies to this day. We work with Mitchell, Bedford, Wooledick. We work with the surrounding counties, Orange County, Martin, Greene, Jackson County, other counties. We work with the state agencies, state police, Department of Natural Resources, work with the federal agencies, ATF, the FBI, and the U.S. Marshals. So we have done that, and we are doing that. We share information with other agencies on cases. Greg mentioned the catalytic converter thefts. A lot of information is shared there between departments to bring those folks to justice. We had a shooting a few months ago, and we worked with other agencies to develop information there to make arrests. In fact, the night that we had two teams out on the western side of the county making arrests, two of our officers were with state trooper in Indianapolis making the arrest on the individual involved up there. So we do work with other agencies. We had a drug task force in conjunction with BPD for several years. Mitchell was involved with that briefly. Several commissions and boards with other agencies and other representatives. The 911 board, the School Safety Commission, the JRAC board, and I would say, unfortunately, I've not seen one representative from Indiana State Police at those meetings. But I would encourage that, and if I'm elected sheriff, I will extend that invitation to get somebody to come to those meetings so we can have a strong cooperation here in the county. Some ways I think we could strengthen that. There used to be monthly meetings between the heads of the agencies. That may be something we need to look at again, maybe come back to. Training venues, we have hosted some nationally recognized training, Desert Snow, Below 100, Street Survival School. When I was training coordinator, I did extend the invitation to other agencies and officers came, so we've had good cooperation there, and that's something we maybe need to continue to keep going forward. If elected sheriff, I definitely will be able to work with other agencies, and I want to strengthen our cooperation, but we do have cooperation today. So.
Okay. Well, Mr. Taylor, you mentioned earlier that you're a gun guy, strong Second Amendment supporter, as most of us Republicans are. I know there's a lot of talk and threats made by politicians in Washington to, potentially infringe on some of our Second Amendment rights. As sheriff, you'd be one of the main people in our county that would have to enforce those laws, if there are any. First off, what's your thoughts on that? Any particular changes or stances you have towards that? And just kind of elaborate on your feelings there.
Well, I'm a pro-gun advocate. I'm a lifelong hunter, gun owner, reloader, shooter. I belong to several pro-gun organizations. I belong to the National Rifle Association, the Second Amendment Foundation, the National Sporting Clays Association. And I don't know any particular laws that you're referring to right now, but overall, I think we have to take a good, hard look at anything that comes down the pike. Make sure it passes the constitutional test. And if it's something that is deemed unconstitutional, then I will stand opposed to it. I've been asked by several people on the campaign trail, hey, what if the federal government comes in and says, hey, turn in your guns, we'll come door to door and take those. Are you going to participate? And I said, absolutely not. You will not see any member from my agency going door to door taking guns from law-abiding citizens. That will not happen.
Mr. Day, same question to you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me make this clear. I'm a staunch defender of our Constitution. In my opinion, next to the Bible, the U.S. Constitution is probably the greatest document that's ever been written. I'm in awe of the wisdom and the courage and foresight that our founding fathers had when they wrote such a perfect document that it has stood 250 years. We have the greatest country on the face of the earth, and it is because of the United States Constitution. It's no secret that I strongly support the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. It's one of the most strongly worded rights. It's one of the most strongly worded amendments when it says the right shall not be infringed. The fact that we have the right to keep and bear arms helps us keep all of our other rights that we're also guaranteed in the Constitution. I personally own guns for hunting, for collecting, for sport, for personal protection. Firearms have been a part of my life since I was a youngster, and they continue to be. I was a supporter of, I veered away from my current boss, and I was a supporter of Indiana's constitutional carry bill. As a law enforcement officer, the people who I worried about having guns were not the people that were out there getting permits in the first place. Additionally, in Indiana, we still have laws that prevent serious violent felons from possessing firearms, and we also have enhancements to crimes such as drug dealing and other things like that. So the fact that constitutional carry passed does not take away that aspect of things. As we look at some of the new laws and things that are coming out, I'm extremely troubled with the fact that the new leader of the ATF that President Biden is appointing is such a gun control advocate. I worry that they will try to pass sneaky laws or things that are an attack on our rights. I worry that the ATF and organizations can just wave their pen and change definitions of different types of firearms and weapons like that, which has the potential to make current legal firearms illegal with the stroke of a pen. It bothers me greatly that the Second Amendment and guns seems to be what everybody wants to attack and go after. It's kind of like it's the low-hanging fruit whenever something happens across the country. When in reality, there are so many things that go into incidents like that. Mental health that we need to figure out how we address. The absolute erosion of family values and morals in this country and in our society. Movies and video games that just numb our youngsters to killing and the like. There's just literally there are dozens and dozens of things that need to be addressed. So I take it personally when they try to attack our right to bear arms. So we have to be careful not to let those rights be taken from us. We have to stand up. And like Greg, I've been asked that question lots of times, and I've been on record through different Facebook posts for the last 13 months saying that an agency under me will never be a part of the illegal seizure of any type of firearms. We will not assist the federal government in any way, shape, or form in that. As your sheriff, I will always respect all of your constitutional rights, definitely including the Second Amendment.
Thank you, and I'll stay with you, Greg. Also, kind of keeping on the same national issue, you're probably getting a lot of questions about or dealt with in the last couple of years, both of you gentlemen. Obviously, in today's world, there's a lot of polarized public opinion towards law enforcement. Some cases very negative. Obviously, some cases I think locally here probably pretty positive. But I want to ask your opinion. Do you think in Lawrence County that there is an issue with the public perception of law enforcement? And if so, do you have any ideas to strengthen opinion and trust between the public and Lawrence County Sheriff Department and you one sheriff?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So let me start off by saying that absolutely over the past couple of years, law enforcement seems to have come under a lot of fire nationally as it relates to rhetoric, disparaging comments, and cries for defunding the police. We see it all over the place. As a guy who's been sent to downtown Indianapolis to work multiple details, including when we had the civil unrest back in the summer of 2020, I've heard plenty of derogatory comments said to me to my face in these areas. It's even a totally different world as close as Monroe County to us as far as how the public and the police interact. But we are, as Heath said, we're extremely fortunate here to have such a great, supportive community. I've not experienced those kind of comments here or that type of treatment. In fact, even in the darkest days and when things were really gearing up nationally, folks around here seem to really go out of their way to tell us that they supported us and to thank us for what we did. I mean, we even had rallies around the courthouse, and I cannot express my thanks enough for what that means as far as keeping morale up. You know, the worst thing, all these pundits that defunding the police and things like that, the worst thing that we can do as a society is to make it so unbearable that nobody wants to go into law enforcement, where we drive away all the quality candidates. And we're seeing it in every police agency in the country, and we're no different here. It's tough to get people to buy into having to put up with those things. So absolutely thank everybody in this area for their great support. Now, with that being said, one of my foundational pillars I talked about earlier is accountability. Now, we as law enforcement officers, you know, we cannot be held to a perfect standard. We all know that only Jesus Christ lived a perfect life here on earth. We're going to fall short sometimes. But as law enforcement officers, we need to be held to a much higher standard than what the general public is. We just have to be held accountable for doing the right thing at the right times for the right reasons. We just have to be. And I'm not going to fool myself, and I'm not going to hide anything. It's no secret that multiple agencies here in Lawrence County have not been immune to issues with law enforcement. We've all read about it. We've all seen what's going on. We cannot allow this type of culture to exist. You know, it's embarrassing and it sheds a bad light on all of us. Because I want to make this clear, the vast majority of our law enforcement officers do a phenomenal job. They do it with integrity and they do it for the right reasons. And I'm extremely proud to be a part of that. So it's embarrassing when things like that happen. As your sheriff, I would take allegations of wrongdoing extremely serious. I'm not going to sweep anything under the rug. If an employee is doing something wrong, they're going to be held immediately accountable and face the appropriate consequences. We're going to be as transparent as we can possibly be. As leaders, we need to model the type of behavior that is going to be expected from all of our employees. I kind of like the old saying that if you live your life in such a way that if somebody speaks badly of you, nobody's going to believe them. That's a pretty good motto to have. So we as an agency, we need to be professional and full of integrity at all times. We need to be held accountable. And if that's the case, we don't have to worry about things embarrassing us and the negative talk that comes our way. And I also want to say this, that, I don't think my answer is unique. Greg is a great man of integrity, and the one thing that I will say about both of us is that I think you would be hard-pressed to find somebody that's going to accuse either one of us of wrongdoing or misbehavior in that time, and I appreciate that greatly about him. So it just boils down to helping strengthen that trust. I put it out there as one of my priorities is connections with the community and holding once every quarter, once every 6 months meetings in each quadrant of the county so that people can talk to us about their concerns and we can share with them what we're doing. And just really, it's just in the way we carry ourselves every single day. It comes back to accountability, accountability, accountability.
Greg, with your experience in the Sheriff's Department, have you had any history with people within the county having negative opinions towards law enforcement? And if so, I hope not, but if so, do you have any ideas on how to strengthen that bond with the community from the Sheriff's Department's perspective?
Well, I'd like to say we are extremely blessed to live in Lawrence County. As Greg said a while ago, this county is very supportive of its law enforcement officers. We see that on a daily basis. A few months ago, maybe a year and a half ago, the Back to Blue event that was put on the Boys and Girls Club to recognize those officers. I was fortunate enough to be able to speak on behalf of our department. That was a great event that was put on just to show that the community supports its law enforcement officers. Not a week goes by that I don't walk into the sheriff's department and there's cookies, pizza, candy, whatever, left there by some organization or some citizen who just wants to come by and say thank you for what you do. It's much appreciated. Always as we're out and about, people are coming up, shaking our hands, saying thank you for your service, we appreciate what you do. And the general public has no idea how much that means to us. That people really just pour into us like that and support us, and we are extremely blessed in this county. So I think to keep that going, we have to be professional while we're discharging our duties. We have to be transparent, and we have to stay engaged with our community. And some ways that I would like to see us stay engaged with our community is our community policing. We do a good job with that. I want to find ways to improve upon that. We put on some NRA-sponsored programs. Handgun safety class for civilians, refuse to be a victim class for civilians. We want to stay engaged with those, keep working with our community, doing all we can for them because of all they do for us. As chief deputy, one of my functions is to deal with concerns from citizens. And I will tell you, we get very few of those. From time to time, we'll get somebody to call in with a concern, and we'll work diligently try to find answers to what it is they're talking about. But we get very few of those, so I think we're doing a good job there. And as sheriff, I want to be approachable. That's one thing I've heard out on the campaign trail. People say, Greg, we like the fact you're approachable. We like the fact you're easy to talk to. And that's how I want to stay engaged with our citizens, keep building on that public trust. Hey, if you do have an issue, come by and see me. We'll sit down, have a cup of coffee, and we'll talk about it, and we'll work hard to get an answer to your problem.
Well, Greg, you probably have as much experience as anybody in dealing with the couple questions I have with commissioners as far as a new jail facility. What are your thoughts on the need for a new jail? And describe your reasons for that opinion.
Well, I believe the question was, is there an immediate need for a jail, for a new jail? And that word immediate, no, I don't necessarily believe we need to start breaking ground tomorrow, but I do think we need to have a plan in place, because at some point, at some time, we're going to have to make some pretty hard decisions on what we're going to do. We have an aging infrastructure built in 1990, originally designed for 88 inmates. It's considered full capacity about 144, and today we had 159 inmates when I checked this morning when I got to work. That causes concerns of safety not only for our employees, but for the inmates as well. And I want to point this out, because I have heard this a few times out and about talking to people. There seems to be a misconception that whoever is sheriff can just snap his fingers and say, I want a new jail. That's not how that works. This is a process between commissioners, council. At some point, the citizens will have an input in this. So I just think we need to have a plan in place, so when the decision is made, are we going to build, are we going to repair, or are we not going to do anything? We need to have a plan in place, ready to go when that day comes.
Same question to you, Greg.
Okay, well, as I stated earlier, I started my career in the Lawrence County Jail back in the late 90s. And even then, even though the jail was less than 10 years old, there were already problems that we were dealing with. It was talked about earlier, and the commissioner's part of this, that the jail was built with outdated technology, materials. There's probably a reason that the contractors and the architects have all went bankrupt and haven't been in business for years. So understanding that, I certainly am not naive enough to say that there's not large concerns and monumental issues with the current facility. But I also know that $40+ million is a jaw-dropping figure to taxpayers, to many of us. Unfortunately, taxpayer base in Lawrence County is not increasing. It's not like we're a growing metropolitan area with endless pockets and all kinds of money to spend on things. And as I believe what Scott said earlier, due to the lack of having to borrow on large projects, the credit rating that the county now has when seeking a new bond is going to make the interest rate extremely high. We also have to think about the fact that inflation is through the roof, building materials have skyrocketed, just cost of everything in general is astronomical. So as a fiscal conservative, I weigh such spending just as I do things in my personal life. Is this a want? Is it a future need, or is it an immediate need? And when we look at that, we have to ask ourselves questions like, does outdated mean obsolete? Have we obtained a complete estimate to get the current jail facility functional for several more years while we save toward a goal? Can we even afford such a project? Are we shopping a little bit for a Corvette before we know that we can even afford a Chevette? Is a new jail more important than employee retention or fixing the county's ambulance shortage crisis? As someone who was at a medical emergency just last week, it takes a long time for ambulances to get to places these days. So we have so many concerns countywide that are going to have to be addressed. And I just feel like Greg said, a sheriff just can't snap his fingers and request a new jail. It's going to happen. But we do have to work with commissioners, council members, citizens. We have to prioritize all these needs in our county in a way that puts our citizens first. Is a jail one of the top 2 or 3 things we need to worry about? It's going to improve the lives of our citizens. And again, I get it. It's a facility that has been open 24/7 for 31 years. And back when I was at the jail, it was built for 88 people, and they had doubled that capacity to 166 when I was the jail commander there. But there was not a day that I worked there that we had less than 200 inmates back then. That was back before the days of jail overcrowding lawsuits and things like that. They were packed in there like sardines. So it has been used and abused. I absolutely know there are issues. But before we saddle our taxpayers with any type of huge debt, we need to explore all the ways that we can make our current facility last longer while we save toward what will no doubt eventually be an inevitable building of a new facility. But let's be looking at these things, but let's start planning towards saving and just prioritize what we need.
Okay, stay with you, Greg. So obviously, you guys have both mentioned it earlier. Drug abuse is a sizable problem in Lawrence County. Turn on the news or going to any of the news sites, it's usually one of the headlines of people that have been arrested for drug offenses, which, partially you're happy that they're being arrested, but kind of sad at the same token. So, there is a lot of debate today regarding the effectiveness of incarceration for drug offenders versus, various treatment options presented to drug abusers. As a sheriff candidate, you feel local law enforcement should make any changes, one way or the other, to help keep citizens of Lawrence County safe from the illegal drug trade and irresponsible drug use?
So this right here is one of the most important questions that could be asked. The dealing and the illegal use of methamphetamine, heroin, and opioids is absolutely the #1 issue that faces law enforcement here in Lawrence County and really most places. Unfortunately, a huge percentage of all of our problems, both socially and criminally, stem from illegal drug use. One of the, and this may not be politically correct, but one of the dumbest things that I hear people say is that illegal drug use is a victimless crime, and that we should not enforce possession and usage of these substances. We shouldn't enforce laws about that. Well, I'm going to let everybody in on a little secret here. It's not victimless. There's victims everywhere as it relates to drug use. Children are neglected and abused every single day by parents or guardians that are so focused on getting their next fix that nothing else matters to them. Have you ever walked into a house to find toddlers with nothing to wear, nothing to eat, covered in filth, living in the most disgusting conditions possible. All because their parents are high and they don't care about their kids anymore. I have. Those kids are victims. You know, have you ever been part of an investigation into the brutal molestation and murder of an infant by a suspect fueled on drugs? Unfortunately, I have. That child was a victim. Addicts often can't hold down jobs, but they still have to have their money to buy their drugs. They turn to committing burglaries and thefts to pay for their habit. Those law-abiding citizens who are just trying to make a living or provided for their family, they're certainly victims when their home's broken into or their property stolen. We think about violent crimes. I can name 2 shootings and a carjacking and numerous batteries right here in Lawrence County in the past 7 or 8 months that stem from illegal drug use. There were victims associated there. How about parents that I hear from as I'm out on the campaign trail who try to take their children to local playgrounds, but they have to check the area to make sure there's no discarded used syringes laying around. It becomes a health issue, a public health issue for all of us. Overdose deaths, sadly, have become the leading cause of death for people ages 18 to 45 in the United States. And Lawrence County is not immune from that. We can all look at all the overdose deaths that we've experienced here in these past couple of years, past few years. Don't tell me for a second that the parents and family members of those people who are overdosing and dying are not victims. I'm beyond tired of seeing our family, friends, and our neighbors suffer. So what can we do about it? First of all, we have to support addiction treatment options. We need facilities. We need choices where people can go and get help. We have to partner with local organizations and maybe even churches in their efforts to curb addiction. We have to continue to be part of the drug court and other programs for our justice system. A few weeks ago, I got a Facebook message from a lady who I'd arrested a couple of times in the past couple of years for drugs. And she was so proud because she was about to complete drug court, which is not an easy task if anybody knows what that entails. And she has invited me to her graduation from that. And that's a pretty awesome thing that we can have some success stories. We need to look at ways that we can bring treatment options into the jail. The faster we get programs to people, the better chances of success maybe we're going to have. You know, oftentimes people aren't ready to get help until they hit rock bottom, and sometimes sitting in that jail cell feels like rock bottom to them, so maybe we can get them started on that path. We can also stay up to date on all the current options in our area that are out here in the region. We can have a handout, flyer, so to speak, that our officers can give out when they encounter people dealing with addiction issues. You know, not when they're getting ready to go to jail, but you know, at different calls, whether it be domestics or whatever the case may be. Now, we know that most people, sadly, until they're ready to get help, they're just not going to. They're just not going to. But if we could provide them the resources, and if it could just help one person, then it's all worth it. So, what do we do in the meantime? You know, while we're working towards these things? Well, we wage an all-out war on drug dealers. These are the people that are preying on those that struggle with addiction. The dealers are the ones that are bringing the poison to our loved ones. And do I have a plan to fight this epidemic? Absolutely. I've been on the front lines of this fight for the last 5 years, and we do have a successful blueprint. Well, let me first tell you what my plan's not. It's never going to be making excuses about lack of manpower that keeps us from addressing our number one problem. We're going to sacrifice, we're going to work hard, and think outside the box if we have to, but we're never going to just say we don't have enough people to do it. Once you imagine this, if you're a small business owner, as many of you are, and you're short on manpower, you can't keep up with the orders, you can't keep up with everything, the administrative part of it and all these things. As an owner, what are you going to do? Are you just going to neglect the major orders and neglect those things that need to be taken care of, and those issues? No, absolutely not. You're going to sacrifice, you're going to adjust your priorities. If you're the boss or the owner, maybe you're going to work extra hours to pick up some responsibilities. You know, you're going to take care of your administrative stuff and extra hours while pitching in to help get the job done. Well, it's the same in law enforcement. If you lead a department, do we just say that we don't have the manpower to tackle the number one issue facing Lawrence County, or do we sacrifice? I know what my answer would be. And my team and I have demonstrated a roadmap for successful investigations into drug dealers. It's hard work, it's quality efforts, and it's cooperation. It's led the ACES to help seize over 22 pounds of methamphetamine in the last 5 years, over 2 pounds of heroin and fentanyl, and a half a pound of cocaine. We put drug dealers in prison. We've saved lives because of those efforts. That's a team of just me and 4 or 5 guys. If I'm lucky enough to be elected sheriff, we're going to have a full-time drug detective who works hand in hand with drug detectives from other agencies. One person cannot even come close to doing all that's necessary. My team and I don't do that now. It takes a village. Our patrol officers will receive the training to detect and recognize criminal indicators. We're always going to go beyond the normal to get to the bottom of criminal activity. It's not just the desert snow interstate interdiction. There's specific interdiction and criminal indicators to be watching for in local areas, and we're going to be able to see those things. Our uniform officers and the drug detectives are going to work together. It's the plan that's worked for my team, and it's a plan that will work if we put in the effort. We're going to follow up on tips, we're going to patrol high drug activity areas, and we're going to relentlessly pursue those peddlers of the poison. We'll work closely with the prosecutor's office. I have an excellent relationship with them, and we're going to ensure successful prosecution. Our investigations will be thorough and of the highest quality. I have the unique experience to be able to come in and be the leader on this number one issue in our county. And I'm truly excited about what we can accomplish if we focus real attention on this issue.
Greg, I'll let you answer the same question.
Well, first of all, we all know the problems that drugs bring to our county. It's no secret. A lot of families been affected by it. My family's personally been affected by it. And it's something that we're going to have to deal with. I have empathy for some of these people. I understand there's some issues and some problems. But I think as law enforcement officers, I hear sometimes people say, well, maybe you shouldn't do this, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should have a little more compassion on these people and not make arrests. As law enforcement officers, our job is to enforce the laws. That is what we are going to do, period, without question. And some of the things that the department is going to do that I will see that we get done is, we spoke a while ago, allowing our canine officers to have more time to run drug interdictions. We will increase our drug interdiction training. We have had some nationally recognized training that costs the department several thousands of dollars. Desert snow being one of those. We will work with those types of programs. I'll work diligently to get grants to bring that type of training to the county. Other agencies be invited to participate, get our officers, through those training things. If there's going to be any changes to the laws, that's got to come from the legislative side. That's something law enforcement we can't do anything about that. We have to enforce the laws that we have. Get these people arrested, get them in jail, treatment will start. That's not a law enforcement treatment part. We will cooperate with that, drug courts, programs, and things like that. We'll work closely with that. If they want to put programs in the jail, that would be fine. We'll work with that the best we can. We just want to work hard and work diligently to try to solve these issues of drug abuse in our county.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, I'm going to give you guys one more question and kind of let you give your parting thoughts too on top of this as well. Been a good discussion here. I guess we've talked about several things tonight that are pertinent to the sheriff's position in this coming term. Is there one specific critical issue facing the sheriff's department in the coming term that you think is more pertinent than the others, and how do you specifically plan to address it? And as I said, if you have any other parting thoughts, please add those as well. So, sure.
So, Critical issues, the word critical to me equates something that is in crisis. At this time, I do not see anything what I would consider to be a crisis within the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department. Now, there are some concerns. And one is something that's been talked about tonight, and it's something I think is across the board. Several agencies that I've talked to, other sheriffs I've talked to, things we see on the news and in the media. And that is a concern, will we have qualified candidates to fill any positions on the law enforcement and correctional side? Law enforcement's took a beating in the last couple of years. That's no secret. Some things, Seattle, Milwaukee, some of these places, we've taken a beating. So it's created a culture that I feel, and I think like it's been alluded to, some of our younger people are now stopping to think, do I really want to go into that profession? Is that really what I want to do? So it's kind of created some issues, finding qualified candidates. Not only that, we're competing against some other jobs that pay more money. I mean, and the council has done a great job with salaries. We got a raise this year, but they have just so much money they can work with. There are just limits to what they can do. And I know it's hard for us to compete against like Crane. Come work for us in the jail starting out $16.75. Well, I go to Crane and make $22 an hour starting out. It's hard to compete with things like that. So that is one concern I have, is being able to find enough qualified applicants to fill these positions. So we just have to keep working hard, working diligently, trying to promote our departments. Another concern would be what we've already talked about, the jail, the infrastructure problems we have, trying to maintain and manage the jail population. What are we going to do with that building? Are we going to fix it now? How's that going to work? What are we going to do? So, not what I consider critical, but these are a couple of concerns that I have.
Okay.
All right, so obviously we just talked about the number one issue facing law enforcement is the illegal drug use and dealing. But this question specifically addressing a critical issue specific to the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department. And coincidentally, I see the recruitment and especially the retention of employees as one of the most important issues that we have to address immediately. Our county has lost several excellent officers in the past few years. Better paying jobs is certainly one of those reasons. However, I've spoken to several of them, and that's not the only reason. Things like work environment, morale, this is how we've always done it, attitude, a culture that too often doesn't reward and encourage hard work. They've all factored into people leaving the department. This problem is even exaggerated even more in the civilian ranks. The turnover in the jail and dispatch is almost astronomical. A year ago, right after I first announced my candidacy, I wrote letters to every civilian and sworn person at the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department. And I don't know that it would be a stretch to say that half of those civilian employees that got letters from me aren't even working there anymore. That's how great the turnover is. The Sheriff's Department's made up of just over 60 employees, with around 40 of those being in non-sworn positions. We have to foster some stability there while reducing the stress and the demands on our employees. We can't be so short-handed that we have people working almost 80 hours a week, like what was just reported in the newspaper last week. As sheriff, I would love to exercise some fiscal responsibility and figure out some ways to trim fat from our budget so that we have an end goal of better compensating our employees. That is a big deal. But that can't happen overnight, and it's not the only answer. There are other things we have to do. We have to develop and foster a culture that rewards quality, hard work. I've often heard the saying that nothing kills a great employee faster than watching you tolerate a bad one. We can't tolerate bad employees. We will appreciate our team, and we're going to show our people that their work's valued. We're going to create a culture that inspires others to do the same. We have to set and follow standard operating procedures to ensure that all employees are treated equally and fairly. but they act professional and they do so in a safe manner. We all have to be held accountable, as I've said earlier, to doing the right things. As leaders, we have to set that example. We have to be invested in our employees. These are stressful jobs with a lot of hazards. On top of that, it's a 24/7 operation, so shift times, overtime, they create hardships for employees and for families. I'm not saying that I have this magic wand that I can wave and I have all the answers. But we have to explore every single option. We have to be willing to think outside the box when it comes to coming up with solutions. Maybe adjust some shift times or hours, utilize more limited time or part-time employees to a larger extent. We have to increase and improve training for all people, including our civilians. We have to invest in mentoring our young employees. And we have to create advancement opportunities. We have to let people know that we care and that we're trying to do the best we can for them. You know, I have a supervisory history of creating positive work environments because everybody that has ever worked for me, and I see a couple of them here tonight, they know that I don't ask anybody to do something that I am not willing to do myself, or that I have not already done, or that I don't demonstrate. They know that I am their biggest cheerleader, and they know that I genuinely care for them, and I demonstrate it every single day. So I look forward to facing this challenge together with the great employees that are affected by it. I really think we can create a culture that can help stabilize the turnover.
Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I think this has been very informative. Give them a round of applause, guys.